This episode is brought to you by Michelob Ultra, the official beer sponsor of the NBA, who's getting you closer to the game than ever with exclusive prizes. Enter for your chance to win at michelobultra.com/courtside. Enjoy responsibly. 2024 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri. Michelob Ultra registered courtside sweepstakes. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins October 19th, 2023 and ends June 12th, 2024. Multiple entry periods. See official rules at michelobultra.com/rules for free entry deadlines, prices, and details. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
With another episode of The Blue Turf. This is Thad Bell from Kansas City Soccer Journal. With me, I have Eric Bergerud, who I think is probably podcast extraordinaire this week. What do you say?
You, the Comets, the league, everybody's keeping me busy, Thad, but we're in the home stretch of the season, so I would expect nothing less.
How many 10 for 10s are you into now?
Well, we have aired 4, but I'm trying to record as many of them as I can. So I have 2 that I'm recording this week and 1 next week. And then that's all leading into my special super top secret guest for episode 10. So keep watching on Fridays, MASL social media. They keep posting them. I think it's safe to say I expect this week is going to have a Comets connection. So I'm joined by Pete Richmeyer, who does communications both for the Stars and the Comets, and is also a moderator on Twitch, and he has all sorts of stories to share. So I think he's next in the queue, if not this week, the following week.
Cool. I've watched 2 of them. I have actually tabs up with the other 2, so that's how I remember to watch things, as I leave tabs open. Probably not the most efficient on my computer memory, though.
Well, you do what you have to do. I encourage everybody, if you didn't see the one with Tommy Tanner this past week, the former Cleveland Crunch NPSLer, that's a word, and current GM of UCFC, has some interesting takes on everything, including multi-point scoring. And he isn't shy about sharing his opinion. So I'd encourage you to watch if you haven't already.
Yeah, when I've talked to him before, he was not shy about his opinions. That's a very correct way of saying it.
Yep.
All right. Interesting weekend this last weekend. A result against Chihuahua at home for Kansas City. Not the result they wanted by a long shot, though.
Well, they got a point. That's fine. The challenge is Baltimore got 3, and Baltimore's catching up in a hurry. I thought the Comets played a really strong game against Chihuahua. I think they would definitely want to get back that goal that they gave up at the end of the first half. I got a text, Nick Vassos and I got a text from Ryan Sigic explaining what happened with the Chihuahua goal that was taken off the scoreboard. I could be glad to summarize that, but I think you have some stats that about the Comets' woes in overtime. It feels like overtime has been a killer to them, and not just this year, but in recent years.
Yeah, it's not good in overtime. I mean, it's been a long time since they've actually been reasonably good. I don't remember the total number here, but Mike Kuhn broke it down by coaches and their tenure here for the current version of the Comets. So with Kim Røntved, they were actually 4-2 in some form of overtime. Under Vlatko, they were 6-4, but 2-3 since 15-16 with the change there. Under Goran, they were 0-1. Under Kim's second stint, they were 0-4. So he was total of 4-6 by that time. Under Leo, they were 5-14, and under Stefan Stokic, they are 0-4. Not a very good overtime record in the long run.
Well, and then the sheer number, if you think about 19 games, while Leo Gibson, that's a lot of games to take into overtime. And so for me, one of the trends this year has been the shots aren't going in like they have in previous years. I thought that both goalkeepers were terrific the other night. Reynoso showed why he's leading the league with an insanely low goals against average. And ultimately, when things are going well, the balls bounce the right way, and when they aren't, they don't. And that's where the Comets are right now. They play the defending champions really well. I think that they can take something out of that. I'm not a big believer in moral victories, but you build from your last experience. They can take some positives out of that last experience, but once again, they go back on the road, which hasn't been their friend in recent weeks.
No, it hasn't. And I'll be honest, going into the game against Chihuahua with just how their form had been, how good Chihuahua is, their only loss had been, we spoke about it before, but they can't beat Monterey, but they could beat everybody else. So the Comets are really the only ones besides Monterey to take points off of Chihuahua, which is not a bad result in the long run. It's just not what you need when you're in the current run that they are.
No, I think that's right. And a couple things to keep in mind. One, Chihuahua is the defending champions, and I think they proved this past Friday night why they're defending champions. Cable Dom Arena is a very difficult place to come into on the road, and they got the W there. But in addition of mentioning that they're 0-5 against Monterey, 9-0 and everybody else, they have 2 wins against San Diego. And San Diego, obviously no slouch, but Chihuahua has proven that they can defend the championship, and you need to be able to steal points against a team like that. Hopefully 3 rather than 1, but 2 would have been better than 1 as well.
I think that's the lowest point total that Chihuahua has scored in a game, with the exception of playing at Monterey.
Well, and if you look at where they stand on goal differential, one of the best in the league, plus 32, that means that they're consistently beating their opponents by multiple points. And I think that was a good test for the Comets. They have a challenging week coming ahead. We can talk about that. And I think we also need to put where the Comets are in context with Baltimore, because Baltimore is the team that could potentially end the Comets season. And we can talk a little bit about where their schedules lay out side by side.
I don't think we can talk about this last game without talking about probably the elephant in the room, however you want to phrase it. No Leo, no Sosa. I know we have heard that Leo has a knock and so he has an injury and hasn't practiced for a little while. I don't know what the length of time there is. Sosa posted something about not being with the Comets, and as far as we've been told, he has been a healthy scratch. I think that's really the only information we've gotten.
Well, I would say a couple things on that. You can go to the team's website. You can go to the MASL website. He is still a member of the team. He has not, his status is still that. And so we were a little challenged on air by fans watching on, particularly fans watching on Twitch the other night, because Zach Reggett, after Zach scored, pulled out his shin guards, and they had the numbers 14 and 19 there. And so we reiterated the status, which obviously I think fans have either heard different things, they believe different things, and it doesn't mean that anybody's right or wrong. It means that from a technical perspective, regardless of what people might have read on Facebook, John Sosa is still on the roster, and he's still a healthy scratch. Now, does that mean that you would expect him to make the West Coast trip? No, I'm not saying that at all. It's just that I think fans in this league, and Comets fans in particular, demand a certain transparency that you wouldn't see anywhere else. I think there's a personal relationship the Comets have with the players that you don't see anywhere else. And that also fuels, I mean, go back to the Rega trade, that I can't tell you how many angry comments I read online about the trio being sent to Harrisburg. It's like the Comets had betrayed fans for that. I mean, ultimately, the challenge is this is a business and the business is winning, right? But the relationship that fans build with these players goes beyond business and it makes it personal. And so you have this push pull in situations between the business side of soccer and the personal side of soccer. And I think we've witnessed this past week in Kansas City.
Oh, we have, and I mean, it is difficult. Like you said, this is fans demand want a transparency that you won't find in other sports because the players are so accessible because they go to a local establishment after a game and eat food with them and sign autographs. I mean, it used to be they signed autographs after every game almost, and people would be getting out there getting the autographs from the exact same players for 10 times in a row. They have that relationship with those players. I mean, I consider some of those players to be friends, and so it's always a little bit of a dynamic there for me to try to cover the team, try to be objective about how a player plays, and have a friendship with the player on the other end of that. So it is a little bit difficult at times. I do feel like I toe the line fairly well with remaining objective with players.
So let me try another angle at this. That clearly with this team over the last couple of years, there have been fans that have very strong opinions about lineup. I can't tell you how many conversations I've gotten into either online, in person, et cetera, about goalkeeping on this team. And there are fans with very strong opinions who should be starting goalkeeper, et cetera. When you are the head coach of any team, particularly this team, the Comets, your job is to put the lineup in place that gives you the best chance at winning. And in the MASL, you have 16 spots you can designate for any game. If you're at this point of the year where you're probably looking at two lines, you have to figure out who are my top two target forwards, right? Who are my four top midfielders, assuming you count the other two players that are attackers and midfielders? Who are my four top defenders? Who are my two top goalkeepers? And then what are my situational players on top of that? That's the job that Stefan Stokic has accepted, right? And so there will continue to be disagreement from some quarters who should be the starting goalkeeper. I don't understand that based on how well Neto has been playing, but there's always going to be people out there saying, well, he gets out of his box too soon, his legs are open, etc. Count the number of saves that he made that kept the Comets in the game the other night, and I'd be willing to have that conversation with anybody. When you look at target, right, regardless of Leo's injury, and Zach Rega came back from the U.S. National futsal team, who are your top two targets? I think that even if everybody were healthy at this point of the season, Zach Rega and Rion Marquez are the top two targets. He has to make these decisions at every single line, and he has to figure out what's best for the team, and that's his job, Dad.
Well, it is. It's not going to be easy. I mean, and it's not even you kind of made it in even a very simple thing is top two targets, top two or top four mids, top four defenders, top goalie. But it's not always even that easy because it's not just your top four. It's who plays the best together, who's playing the system better. It's Stefan went to a very high pressure transition offense as much as possible. And sometimes older guys don't last as long in that, aren't as effective. That's not questioning Sosa's technical ability. I mean, I would put him out there as on a restart in a heartbeat, no matter what. But I don't know if I would actually have him playing the top line as a defender all the time either. So it's going to be always a challenge in doing that. And then you're adding that he's been a player with those guys, been their teammate. It's going to be a challenge no matter what he's doing with that. I don't know if there's a good easy answer for any of this, and it never is.
Just a couple things that come to mind here, because again, I spent too much time reading fans' comments, and maybe that gives me a different perspective. You've had now the past two coaches. Well, I mean, you could even go back to Vlatko, say you've had a recent uh, core of coaches, Røntved aside, who have been teammates of the players they coach. That creates challenges. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't in terms of chemistry, respect, etc. So I mean, I think that's a challenge that Comets took on first when they made Leo player coach, then when they made Stefan the head coach. But they signed up for that, right? I think this is a team in evolution. The league has changed too. We showed a stat from your colleague Mike Kuhn the other day, the top 10 players in terms of appearances all time for what I guess you would call Comets 3, the current incarnation. 5 of them were on the roster still this year, meaning that there are a lot of guys with a lot of experience, but experience cuts both ways too. In a team that's evolving into a more transition back and forth game, trying to figure out how do I set my roster so I'm not going to be on the counter attack, which has been my pet peeve now for how many years. That's something that Coach Stokic has to figure out too. And so where do you find the perfect alignment? I think that's a work in progress. And I think that this is a team in search of an identity. I think that changing captains a couple weeks ago was a smart move, because clearly Nacho gives them some semblance of identity in terms of what do you expect on the field, but you still have to be able to perform. And I would encourage you to look back at the goal that was the game winner for Chihuahua. They got sucked up offensively, deflection, lost the ball, and Chihuahua went on the counter. And I think Chihuahua knew what they wanted to do against Kansas City, and they were successful. Defend, 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 counter, take advantage of our opportunity, goal.
Going back to something you mentioned earlier about how fans, you listen to fans, if you'd put a lineup out based upon what the fans were wanting, you don't know what you would end up getting. On the KC Soccer Journal, we actually do a fan poll every week before a Sporting Kansas City game, because we have a lot more fans that interact with us there on that side. And it's what do you want the lineup to be? And it is obvious. I don't say it's sometimes very crazy what fans will vote for. The consistency, because you're crowdsourcing it and you got enough people there, it's usually not too bad. But what people end up wanting, like you could have a goalie who's won 10 games in a row and they still want the third goalie to be out there. They would want somebody else to be out there that I would see is not the likely thing to do if you're wanting to win games. Maybe they're ready to throw the season out and just throw out the young guys and see what they do. But last year, Sporting didn't do that, and they just kept playing, and they ended up in the playoffs and doing pretty well.
So just a thought to this. I had a revealing conversation with somebody who is not currently in the MASL, has a coach, but not currently in the MASL, who this person's counter is this: unless you go to practice every day, unless you understand what's happening in the locker room, it's hard from an outside to second guess a coach, because you don't see what's going on. You don't see how people are performing. You may see from a game to game perspective, but you don't it's like seeing the tip of the iceberg. You don't see everything that's happening underneath the water, and the coach uniquely does. So sure, it's very easy in a lot of sports to second guess coaches, but ultimately they're the ones whose job is to assess quality, fitness, fit, everything else you want. And at the end of the season, it's the ownership management's job to assess that coach. And so we'll see whether Kansas City holds on to a playoff spot or not. You've had Brian Budzinski on this podcast not too long ago, who made it pretty clear that he has confidence, he retains confidence in his head coach.
Because I asked him very clearly, is he on the hot seat? And he said no. And again, just looking at what coaches see versus fans, and I don't want to in any way, shape, or form say fans shouldn't have opinions on who should play. That's part of being fan. That's part of being supporters. That's part of enjoying the game is saying, I think that guy's a better player or whatever. That's all part of it. But there's been times where I was able to watch a lot of the Wizards practices, a lot of FC Kansas City practices, a lot of Comets practices. And while I may have some different opinion, I also know that I haven't played the game at the levels that Peter Vermees or Kim Røntved or Vlatko or Stefan or Vlatko on the other team has played. But I mean, I still have my own opinions, and I still think I might be right, but that's okay. But there are valid reasons why they're putting players out there. They're not saying, "Oh, we just don't like this guy. We're going to get rid of him. We don't like this player." It's not that. I mean, honestly, people will criticize Peter Vermees because they think he holds grudges. He has players he thinks is going to win, or players that's going to give him the best chance to win. The same will be for Stokic. The same will be for Vlatko again, and they're going to put the players out there that they think will do the best and help them win in the long term. They might be wrong, and they sometimes are. All right, I think have we covered this enough?
Well, I think we can. I'll be curious to hear the feedback we get on this one, because I would imagine there will be some critiques that we get, and I
Yeah.
accept that and I respect that. And I think that when Stefan Stokic signed a contract and they announced that he was going to be head coach of the Comets, it comes with the territory that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on what you do, particularly with this franchise and the history of this franchise, more so than maybe some other franchise in terms of fan expectations. He signed up for that. He knows that. I think the challenge now is you see a team that is played 3/4 of a season, 6 games left, hanging on for dear life to keep that fourth playoff spot. What is it going to take to get there? And he believes that he has the combination that he needs to be successful. History may come up with another look at that, but that's his job and that's where he's at.
And I'm gonna twist your words a little bit. You said he has what he needs to be successful. He's going to do what he needs to do to give himself the best chance to be successful. He may not have the players. He may not have the players ultimately he wants. Like again, last year with Sporting, they were terrible for the first 10 games. Peter kept saying, "I don't have the players. Give me a chance," and they turned it around. So it will be whether or not they have the players they want. That may change. Again, that may change over time. I do have faith that neither Stokic or Vermees or Vlatko are intentionally not playing players that would give them a best chance to win. I would also encourage fans. Again, I'm never going to say you can't criticize or challenge or have a different opinion, because you should have your own opinion about these things based upon what you see, but at least be fair in that the other side of that is doing what they see is the best thing for the team to do to be successful. Is that fair?
That's fair, and I think time's going to tell. Did this work? Did this not? I think it's a fair point. Is there the right chemistry on the roster to be successful, particularly in an evolving game? And that may be a good segue looking ahead. Is Baltimore, based on the fact that they had problems earlier in the year, made some lineup changes that have paid off really, really well. They brought in Ricardo Dieguez, who was a free agent, former Florida Tropic player. He had 5 goals on Saturday against UCFC. I'd say that was a pretty strong pickup, but
Yep.
they were in a situation where it didn't look like they had any prayer of getting a top 4, and they rolled the dice. They made some moves and they were successful. I think it remains to be seen whether the Comets have any moves in them right now, whether that's even in the cards, whether they could find anybody, bring somebody in that would help. But they're facing a Baltimore team that's rejuvenated, 7 points behind them with 4 games in hand. The telling two games for each team for me are going to be that. So Kansas City goes this weekend to San Diego. I still hold out hope. I'm going to watch the Comets win for the first time ever in the Pechanga Arena and watch San Diego lose for the first time ever. If I didn't have any hope, why even bother going? So they have San Diego and they have Empire. Empire came here. They were tired. Comets walked all over them. Empire took the Sockers to a shootout last night at home. And so if people are banking on a win in Ontario, I would say you're going to have to earn those points. They're not coming to you. Juxtapose those two road games with a coming trip Baltimore has down the road where they have to go to Monterey and Chihuahua. All right. Comets need to do better in those two games than Baltimore does in their two games. And that could be the difference in terms of playoff or not. And that's what I'm looking for this weekend. How many points does Kansas City get out of those two games? And then when Baltimore makes their trip, how many points did they get in Chihuahua and Monterey? That could be the difference to who's the fourth seed in the East.
And just to say it, Kansas City is on the road at San Diego, at Empire, back home against Ambush, Utica, on the road against Ambush, and back home for the final against the Sockers.
Have to win. So you're going to have to get some results here, and I think probably run the table on that last stretch, right? So you have 3 games at home and then a game at St. Louis. That's 12. No offense to St. Louis. St. Louis beat the Comets in overtime last time at the Family Arena. Those are 12 points for the taking. No excuses. Granted, Utica has been playing well. Granted, Utica beat the Comets last time. Granted, the Sockers are the 16-time champions. Those are 12 points right there. If you can couple in 3 points, 4 points, whatever, this Southern California road trip, then all of a sudden things might be looking a little bit better.
All right. Anything else we need to cover?
We could cover a lot, Thad. Just suffice it to say, you have a team that started 7-1. The wheels came off. They're making adjustments. You have head mechanic Stokic rotating tires, checking valves, checking pressure. I mean, that's where they're at. San Diego is a team that played with a lot of injuries. They had players that went down this week, so they're not 100% in. Championship teams find a way to, even when you're not expected, to win on the road. And so this is going to be a test for this Comets team. What can you do in 2 places you haven't performed well?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I think that they can get some points out of this. I don't expect all of them by a long shot, though.
And we'll see. I mean, this is not what anybody anticipated for sure. And yet this is where the Comets are. I'd say here's my parting thought, Thad, and I remember saying this on the field post game against Empire when I was talking to Lucas Sosa. How many teams who've gone through this struggle in this league would still be drawing 4,700 fans a game? I think it's a testament to the support that this city gives for soccer in particular. But particularly the love affair with the Kansas City Comets. There are a lot of teams that, I mean, they're 8-6-4, let's call that 8-10. There are a lot of fans that might check out on a team that started 7-1 and basically are 1-9 otherwise. And yet the fans still keep coming to Cable Dome Arena. The Comets feed off those fans. And we hope that fans will turn out for the last 3 games. That March 2nd game, Thad, that's Sporting Kansas City's opener. So it's going to be a really good opportunity for the Comets faithful to make a statement, even while there's an MLS game across town.
Yeah, and that's going to be a hard draw for me there. And I mean, you always bring up a good point with the fans, the great support, and I would I'm trying to think of how to phrase this best, but sometimes when teams don't talk about players or what's going on behind the scenes, sometimes it is because they're trying to do something, and sometimes it is because it is actually out of respect for the players that they're dealing with. I don't know a ton of details about things going on, and I've said everything that I know to say at this point. So I'm just going to say I think both sides are trying to be respectful, and I hope that fans will at least respect that.
Yeah, let me maybe wrap a bow on this. So I go back to what Mike Kuhn shared with us. We showed on air the top 10 players in terms of appearances for Comets 3. When you look at the current 5 players on the roster who appear in that list, you have Leo Gibson, John Sosa, Ramon Palmer, Nacho Flores, and Robert Palmer. All 5 of them, when you look back at their careers, they're going to be 5 of the all-timers in Kansas City soccer history. Nothing can be said that would detract from that.
Nope.
Their place in history, and for me, that's some of the context too, regardless of what happens in the moment, regardless of what decisions are made, that from a long-time perspective, these are 5 of the all-time greats, and not just greats in terms of the last, 14 years of this version of the Comets, but period. And I think we can all appreciate that, celebrate that, and respect that.
I think we've said everything that we wanted to say, and I hope to see all the fans out there, and we are out.